I'm without Roman today and without a guest today, and we're taking a little bit different of an approach, which is we're going to answer some of the questions that our community has had from the first couple of weeks. The first week, I was able to really share about one of, if not the biggest professional failures that I have had. In the second episode, we went deep into Roman's story and his journey into fatherhood and what that has been like. Week 3, we had a wonderful guest, Chris Masters, on, who runs the largest homeless shelter between Salt Lake and Denver, who is a former resident of that shelter. So his journey from homelessness and being unhoused and addiction to being able to give back and inspire and instill hope in others. And then last week, Roman went deep with our very own Ian Gershman and COO at Ava Health. So this week we're fielding some questions from our community, and next week and beyond, we'll be back to our normally scheduled programming with Roman and myself. So, all right, let's start. Question number 1. You lead with transparency even when it's uncomfortable. Why risk being that open as a CEO? Transparency and accountability are probably two of the characteristics and what I would consider assets of a business that are just completely missing in the world of healthcare. And when we speak, we talk primarily about behavioral healthcare, mental health, and substance abuse treatment. And most of what you see is just, let's call it deceptive marketing, which is people walking around conferences and networking events and out in the community and with the content they create and the websites that they write and the social media posts, which is always posturing and positioning like we have figured it out. And the people that we're selling to are people in crisis. So we look at a mother who's been on Google because she just found a needle in her son's room. And he's 22 years old and he's struggling at school, or he's dropped out of school and she doesn't know what's going on. And all of a sudden she's discovered a needle in his room and he's not there and she can't get a hold of him, and she's on Google desperately trying to find a place for him. And we have built these websites and these content machines that are continuing to say, send them to us, remortgage your house, take out loans, don't use your insurance, just come and pay everything you can and we have a solution. And so for me, transparency as a CEO comes down to saying really openly, we don't have all the answers. We are continuing to explore and to try things and to take risks. And I don't just mean that in the sense of how we care for individuals, but also in the sense of how we run these businesses. How can you be accountable as an organization if you're not transparent? I think that ultimately transparency opens the door for true relationship, true intimacy. And boy, do we need more and more of this in behavioral health. Question number 2. What does broken-ish mean to you? And why might it not be a bad thing? I have to say that when Roman first presented the term broken-ish as the proposed title of this podcast, I really struggled with it. I think that for so many years in my life, the idea that I was broken was just a story and a narrative that I had carried for so long. And so when I heard broken-ish without really exploring or being curious about it, I really rejected the idea that I wanted to be part of something that talked about how humans were broken. And it wasn't until I really took a deeper look and I asked a few different people about what their initial reaction was to the name that it clicked. I came into this world questioning the world. I remember very vividly in first grade knowing like at a core, like soul level, that school wasn't for me, that I wasn't going to learn what I needed to learn in school in a classroom, that what they were teaching me was not going to be relevant to the rest of my life. And that's just one example of how I've continued to operate for now 40 years, is looking at the systems and everything within this world and thinking like there's something a little broken-ish about the way that we operate in this world. Being that we're here in the US, it's this complete focus on money and wealth and status and position. And yet people are lonelier than ever and more disconnected than ever. Male suicide rates are higher than ever. overdoses are higher than ever. And yet we continue to just push forward this idea that it's all about what we can do, how much money we can make, the new title, the new position, the new raise, the new salary. And yet how many of us actually even know a few of our neighbors? How many of us actually have communities built? It saddens me. And we've taken this approach with Ava Health and really looking at the very broken healthcare system, the very broken nature of behavioral health, in that if you have money, you can access what some people would consider quality care. However, if I had people on here right now that would speak the truth, and we'll definitely have some over the next, many, many months and years, who will speak to the fact that you could spend $60,000 a month on treatment, or you could spend $6 a month on treatment. And, I'm not sure that people could actually show, validated measures of there being better long-term outcomes. So broken-ish to me is, what it means to me is really this opportunity to get in and explore all of the depths of the human experience, which is the parts of us, the shadow parts of us, the parts we don't show externally, the parts that we don't sometimes show our partners, the parts that we're really uncomfortable to approach, the conversations that we avoid, the discomfort we have in sitting next to somebody who has a differing opinion than us, and actually trying to understand, how did they get here? How did they get to feeling that way, to having those beliefs? What drove them there, right? What was the seed that was planted and the spark? Or how do people become who they are? How do these systems become what they are? Because when we can begin to understand the origins of some of these things and how we've gotten to these places, we can then begin to look at change. So broken-ish to me is this opportunity to sit with really diverse people with really diverse experiences and backgrounds and explore the cracks that exist in this world, and how ultimately there are people out there that are taking inspired action on a daily basis to transform themselves, their families, their communities, their businesses, and the world. So to me, broken-ish is really this opportunity to dive into the depths and to really try to understand how we've gotten to where we are and how people see us continuing to be able to move forward. All right, question 3. How has your relationship with Roman changed over time? And what do you think about him? What did you think about him when you first met him? For those that don't know, I met Roman at one of the darkest moments of his life, and he can share what his own experiences in meeting me. But I've told him this many times, and I'll share this with our guests and our listeners right now, is that I knew from the first moment I met Roman that if he believed enough in himself and was able to overcome what he was struggling with at the time, addiction, mental health, being unhoused, having been incarcerated several times, that if he could transcend those experiences in his life, that he was going to be one of these incredibly bright sparks in the world. I don't know what gives me that insight into people. I think I have done a good job my entire life of bringing together and being able to really see strengths within other human beings, even when they haven't been able to see that in themselves at the time. And so that's where our relationship began. How has that transformed over time? As we went from, I was 25 at the time and he was 23 at the time, or I was 26 and he was 23. And now I'm about to turn 41. So, it's been quite a while. Our relationship has taken such individual paths, and yet we have always in some way been intertwined on those paths. It's almost like when I look at, or in my head think of a helix of DNA and how it intertwines and yet separates at different points. And so from us being, really immature, ego-driven, on fire for the world kids, to now what I feel like is fairly balanced. We're both fathers. We're both in meaningful, stable, long-term relationships. We're working on, bringing Ava Health to fruition and doing this together. It's really been this amazing journey of deepening a friendship over time to where now I think we would both say that we're best friends with one another, and that the time we get to spend with one another is not only fun, inspiring, and motivating, but is also deep and really meaningful. And we continue to push one another to explore the depths of our own humanity, but doing it in the context of working together. Let's dive into question number 4. What's a piece of advice that you've given in the past that you no longer believe? The simplest one is professionally, let them hit rock bottom. This is a tough one because, I got sober in a recovery community, and very much the idea is that we have to hit a place of the ultimate desperation and hopelessness to make the decision to surrender and to take on a very different approach to life. And so that, of course, happened before I ever became a professional in this industry. And so, I really, at my core, and what was part of my own journey was that I had to hit rock bottom. The problem that I now see with that is that recovery, wellness, health takes so many innumerable forms that we have to look at each individual's journey as just that, a unique journey. And so I definitely, for years professionally, would say things to families like, we've got to let him hit rock bottom. We've got to take away all of the comforts of this individual's life. We've got to really create a bottom for them so that they can then build upon that. Unfortunately, I think that far too many people die as a result. And when families decide that they're going to disconnect, that they take the approach of, we can't do anything, they need to want to change, they need to want help, they need to be really motivated and inspired to change their own lives. It's a really dangerous game to play. Families, friends, communities, we have so much strength and so much power in being able to help people. And yet we very much are still in this place where we say things like, they've just got to hit rock bottom. They've really got to take some inspired action towards health and wellness and change. So the biggest piece of advice that I've given many times that I no longer believe in is that someone needs to hit rock bottom to change. And lastly, question 5, what is your biggest fear as a father? From the first moment that the love of my life told me she was pregnant, I can say I haven't felt any fear about being a father. I don't know why that is. I think the way I've tried to explain that to people has been something along the lines of, we've been raising children as humans for, 100,000 years. And I think that there's something innately ingrained in my genetics and my DNA that knows how to be a father, knows how to raise a child. But beyond that, and on a deeper level, I've done so much work around the relationship that I had with my father, who passed away 6 years ago, and have looked at the things that I needed so badly as a child and as a young person, and have believed that I have some insight into what I want to be for my daughter and any more children I may have, which is that if there's anything I can do for them, it will be that they know they are loved and valued for exactly who they are without having to be anything else. I don't care who my daughter is. I don't care what she does. I don't care who she chooses to be. All I want her to feel in her soul, in her nervous system, in her entire being is loved and valued for simply being who she is. So my biggest fear as a father would be that in some way I wouldn't continue to do my own work, which would limit my ability to be fully present for her. Whether that's through working too much, traveling too much, being reactive, being defensive, not treating her mother with the utmost respect, and showing her exactly how she should be treated by a man or a partner. My biggest fear is really related to my own work, because I know that if I continue to grow as a man, as a father, as a partner, that's what she's going to get from me. That's what she's going to learn. It's not going to be what she hears from me. It's going to be what she sees. So I continue to remain very inspired to continue to do the work that I need to do, to continue to address the ways that I show up in the world and in relationship, so that at the end of the day, when I'm laying on my deathbed, she can say, I always knew, no matter what, that I was loved and valued for exactly who I am. So a little bit different of a format this week. It's interesting to sit here by myself and do a little bit of exploration without my best friend and colleague across from me. Every week we'll be here continuing to explore real truths, hard conversations, and sparks of possibility in a world that's a little broken-ish. We'll see you next time.